Red China's Belt and Road Initiative's true objective is to create debt trap conditions for developing countries, where the infrastructure projects are taking place. Typically, Chinese loans assume the form of cash for resources in return for financing and building the infrastructure that poorer countries need. China demands favorable access to their natural assets, from mineral resources to ports. Red China finances many useless, white elephant projects in poorer countries, where their governments would obtain huge loans which are impossible to pay back. The borrowing nations usually suffer from low credit ratings and have difficulty obtaining funding from the international financial market. Red China, however, makes financing relatively easily available with certain conditions and less paperwork than conventional sources. China's tied aid for infrastructure usually benefits Chinese companies, while its loans are in many cases paid back by natural resources. Through this method, China achieves the twin goals of economic penetration and strategic leverage. It aligns with Xi Jinping's plan of dominating the world with its neo-colonialism. Red China's main objective for the Belt and Road Initiative development deals with developing countries is to trap them into borrowing massive loans. In many cases, the unpaid debts result in losing control of important national assets. The developing countries are naively mortgaging their resources and strategic assets to China in hope to improve their nation's infrastructures. The way Sri Lanka has ceded control of the strategic port of Hambantota highlights the issue of debt trap diplomacy. Post-Civil War Sri Lanka went on a borrowing binge to reconstruct its dilapidated infrastructure. To the Sri Lankan government, China is a benevolent friend, offering cheap, easy, and addictive money, an attractive alternative to the West's democratic values. But Sri Lanka soon ran into economic woes, and when the debt burden became untenable, the Sri Lankan government granted the Chinese 70% ownership and a 99-year operational lease for the port of Hambantota, after it struggled with debt payment.
In recent years, many African countries have found themselves a new sugar daddy: China.
Over the last several decades, China has been pumping resources into Africa. The country has invested hundreds of billions of dollars across the continent, ranging in everything from transportation and infrastructure to real estate and technology.
As Africa's main trading partner since 2008, China is securing a long-term foothold where it can do business and also ensure the security of its citizens and companies. China is asserting a more muscular approach across Africa, where China is the single largest creditor. With narrow revenue bases and undiversified economies, there are doubts about whether these countries will be able to service debt. $132 billion in Chinese loan financing was advanced to 49 African countries between 2006 and 2017. Their ability to service Chinese loans might now be seriously undermined by plunging commodity prices and recession. Indeed, many African countries have recently experienced the negative consequences of this strategy. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is a major destination for Chinese investment, especially in mining, with Chinese companies invested heavily in the country's copper and cobalt resources. Red China, on the other hand, is the world's biggest importer of cobalt, which it uses to make lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles, smartphones, tablets, laptops, and high-tech items. It also consumes the most copper in the world, using it to make infrastructure and manufacturing material. China holds more than a third of the nation's debt, which stands at about $9 billion. The investments in the DRC, however, are lackluster, while the pandemic slows its economy.
Those are Chinese. You can find it written Chinese name. Everywhere Chinese, everywhere Chinese. So we are controlled by Chinese as well.
In 2019 and 2021, unable to obtain lending from the International Monetary Fund, the Democratic Republic of the Congo government begged Red China to restructure its debts so they could borrow more from other financiers. Uganda is joining fellow African countries, including Ethiopia, Zambia, Chad, and others that are facing debt pressures, either triggered or exacerbated by the effects of COVID-19. In April 2021, Uganda asked its major creditors, including Red China, to negotiate a possible suspension of loan repayments, amid a growing default risk, after its debt ballooned to more than 50% of its GDP.
Back in the day, when one country wanted to take over another country, they had to beat them in a war. Or they had to rent the other country on Airbnb and then just never leave. But now, it looks like a country might have found a way to take over another country with the stroke of a pen.
China's recently been accused of trying to take over Uganda's Seoul International Airport if the East African country fails to pay a $200 million loan for the expansion of the site.
At this rate, if Uganda fails to repay the loan, Uganda's only international airport will soon be a Chinese asset.
The tiny East African nation of Djibouti is at the core of this debt trap diplomacy. Beijing has taken root in Djibouti through numerous infrastructure projects, including a new port, 2 new airports, and the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway. The sheer scale of these projects, combined with the fact that they are concentrated in a small, but strategically located, cash-strapped country, make Red China's presence significant. In Djibouti, the situation is particularly alarming. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Support Base in Djibouti is a military base operated by Red China. It is the Red China Navy's first overseas military base, and was built at a cost of $590 million. Apart from being China's first overseas military base, the Djibouti base represents the first pearl in Red China's string of pearls along the sea route connecting China to the Middle East. The term refers to the network of Chinese military and commercial facilities and relationships along its sea lines of communication, which extend from the Chinese mainland to Port Sudan in the Horn of Africa. The sea lines run through several major maritime choke points, such as the Strait of Malacca, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Strait of Mandeb, as well as other strategic maritime locations. The emergence of the string of pearls indicates China's growing geopolitical influence through concerted efforts to increase access to ports and airfields, expand and modernize military forces, and foster stronger dominance with trading partners. India believes this plan, together with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and other parts of China's Belt and Road Initiative, is a threat to India's national security. Such a system would encircle India and threaten its power, trade, and potentially territorial integrity. Furthermore, China's support for India's traditional enemy of Pakistan and its Gwadar port is viewed as a threat, compounded by fears that China may develop an overseas naval military base in Gwadar, which could allow China to conduct expeditionary warfare in the Indian Ocean region. More than claiming natural resources, national critical assets, and sovereignty, the Belt and Road Initiative developments displace these nations' local people, take away the local economy, and replace it with Chinese businesses, which benefit Red China. They install a new Chinese population in the region, and systematically change the culture and the local way of life. Botan is a major location of the BRI's rail line plan that connects China from the Yunnan region across Southeast Asia and down to the Singapore Peninsula. Botan, since the 1990s, has been an official border crossing between the two countries. Botan was transformed into a casino town and promised to be a tourist hub. While Botan is part of Laos, most of its inhabitants speak Mandarin Chinese as their native language.
Yêu Lao có Hewia có xa xa.
Yêu Chín mình tài gắn bỏ.
Yêu Chín có Hewia quay quay hay yang có quay quay, hay yêu đi có hay yang có xa xa. Man, can see.
In 2002, a big Chinese casino was built in Botan. The casino mainly attracted Chinese visitors because gambling is illegal in China. With the gambling business came crimes, death, and a displacement of its people. In 2003, the area was designated a special economic zone, and the Laos government signed a 30-year lease on 1,640 hectares of land with a Chinese developer who invested $500 million. To leave space for the special economic zone, the whole village of Botan was relocated 20 kilometers away, in a settlement area called New Botan. The Special Economic Zone, which focused on casinos and hotels, was named Botan Golden City, which ran on Beijing time and sought to attract gamblers from China and Thailand. The city has a bad reputation due to violence, murder, and suicide of people unable to pay off their debts to the Chinese casino concessionaires.
กระชนใหญ่กันย้อนเขาหู้จับหู้หมดนะคนเราผู้ใดมีเงินบ่มีเงินเขาหู้นั่นน่ะอันจูรุ่นแบบเขาลิ้นกระชนใหญ่รุ่นแบบมาเฟียเลยนะคนมีเงิน
Was there trouble here?
ปัญหาย้อนคนเขาใต้หลายคนใต้เนาะมัน
ฆ่ากันเลยว่ะ
แบบขาจังๆนี่บ่มีสุดท้ายโดนตึกตายบ่อยู่แล้วขาตัวเองตายเลยจังนะอยู่แค่ติ๋วข้อเขียนข้อใต้อยู่กกใหม่กกยังไว้ซั่น
ไม่ก็มาเหตุผลที่เขาจะเฮ็ดหยังย้อนเหตุผลไหน
แบบนั้นนะเป็นย้อนหยังก็ส่วนหลายมันติดหนี้ติดสินเงินเขาแล้วเนาะชื่อว่าคือเจ้าเนาะเป็นหัวหน้าเป็นบริษัทเนาะเป็นหัวหน้าปล่อยเงินมีเงินหลายเป็นปล่อยเงินให้ค่อยไปซะค่อยยืมเงินเจ้ากินเปอร์เซ็นต์ตกเครื่องมื้อซะผ่อนบ่ดินคาสิโนหมดบัดนี้ก็พัดคดอันน่ะประจำแบบประดากับแบบประจำตัวเองเนาะเอาตัวเองนี่แบบกันชีวิตตัวเองนะประจำเอาเงินมาลีนแล้วก็หมดแล้วก็มาลีนอีกเนาะ
ยืมมาลีนอีกว่า
In 2011, with instruction by Red China, the Laos government closed the casino. The town was abandoned overnight, and the main investors fled, sending Botan and its people into an economic uncertainty. Inevitably, they sink into a deeper debt trap, like the developing countries borrowing from loan shark, Red China.